The desert is sublime, but merciless with the careless. Revenge is a Shudder original distributed by Neon Studios. It was written and directed by Coralie Farge. I hope I pronounced that name correctly. This is her feature film debut, and it centers around a young lady named Jen, who is out with Richard, a married man that has Jen as his mistress. They're out of vacation home, having fun, having all of the sex, and having all the fun, and not even having any of the rock and desert roll, RR. They are just having a great old time. And even though Richard is on the phone with his wife saying, "Don't worry, honey, I'll be home soon. I'm just out here doing what rich men do. Out in the middle of nowhere. I'm not doing anything. No, you don't need to track my phone. Why would you do that?" Richard, let's just say, not exactly the best goddamn guy, but he treats Jen nice at first. And then a couple friends show up for the usual hunting trip. And then things get really dark, really quick, and really sinister. And man, boy, does it become one hell of a goddamn spin on the revenge thriller horror. And that's really about the only type of plot synopsis I can give you without getting into spoilers. And this film did come out back in 2017. And because Coralie has The Substance coming out in just a few days, her next feature film, with Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, Dennis Quaid, and apparently is getting a lot of goddamn praise, I decided to check this out because this, according to a lot of reviews that I skimmed over and a lot of scores that I saw, a lot of people really were saying this put a hell of a spin on the revenge horror. And I will say that they are mostly right. Now, I do want to offer a trigger warning, though, that if certain assault scenes, that's all I can say right there without getting flagged, and I don't want to use a particular word. If those bother you, if the themes of that bother you, if the idea of even hearing any of that bothers you, you're probably not going to have a good time with this. I really would not recommend you watch this, but for those of you that are willing to give this a chance and can give this a chance without triggering something that happened to you, and that's absolutely goddamn horrifying. Some of the stuff that actually happens in this, and just the idea of it, not even what you see, but just what you hear and what is implied. They do a really good job building up the horror before things really, really kick in. And really just centers around a few people. It centers around Dimitri, Stan, Vincent Columbi. Those are the two friends. You have Richard, Kevin Janssens, who was in Close, a terrific movie that I recommend you check out from A24. But the tentpole, the star of this goddamn film, Matilda Ann Ingrid Lutz, an Italian actress slash model who commands your attention from the moment she appears on screen all the way through her power-packed performance till the final frame. So, yeah, I did really like this quite a bit. I wish I had gotten around to this when it first came out, and I might have even revisited it and seen if I still liked it. So I see why people praise this. Now, it's not the most wholly original concept. Revenge, horror, thrillers, whatever category you want to put that under, subgenre of horror. They have, I don't want to say they've been a dime a dozen necessarily, but sometimes they follow the same beats. And sometimes if you don't really get into anything other than the actual, the main character, and even if you don't really get that much meat to the particular person, you want to see them enact their revenge. So in a film like Revenge, it fits. Sometimes it just becomes a lot of, okay, we're just waiting for the inevitable to happen. With this, there's stylistic filmmaking. There's some great camera shots, including stuff in the closing sequence. The desert setting really does add a lot of grit to it. There's a lot of gooey violence, a lot of goopy violence. And once again, Matilda, really, really good in this. She put herself through hell, clearly. And Coralie absolutely understood the assignment, understanding how to do horror filmmaking, the horror of man, the horror of human beings, and also the horror as far as blood and stuff like that. It really is goddamn good. I still think they could have maybe cut 10 to 15 minutes off of it. I think there are a few scenes that stretch a little bit. And that's a minor quibble because this is mostly a terrific goddamn movie. I am going to get into spoilers to talk about some of the juicy bits, but this is on Shudder. It's worth checking out. Neon Studios, this is when they were really starting to build up their reputation. Neon Studios and A24, even though I've had some issues with some of the stuff they've released lately, mostly are my two favorite studios. You put their name on the marquee, I'm going to absolutely check it out. But once again, Matilda, absolutely great. And Kevin was great as Richard. Really, really fucking good. And the other two did a good job as well. But this is really just about, oh, you think you can do that to somebody? No means no. Don't do that. Don't treat people like that. Just don't. Anyway, I'm going to get the spoilers on Shudder if you want to see it. 3, 2, 1, spoilers. So, basically, Jen's having a great old time. Once again, Matilda looks absolutely incredible. Good grief. But, yeah, this thing erupts in violence fairly quickly. There's French and English, language tracks. I mean, there's subtitles and everything. I put subtitles on anyway because sometimes I have a hard time paying attention. I have a bad attention span. Richard is a massive cheater and a massive dick and everything. And the two friends show up with guns. There was some wrestling clips. I was trying to figure out what that was. Was that the UK indies? Was that some New Japan? It looked like they had to kind of digitally edit out the turnbuckles. I was trying to figure out the wrestlers because I could have swore I found some of them familiar. There were only like 2 or 3 guys in the ring. But this was back in 2017. So, yeah, there was a point where there were some drugs that were introduced, and Richard had her hold on to those because you do too much of this, you die. More on that later. Yeah, then Stan decides to be a big old creep and say, oh, you're eyeballing me? Well, you're dressing, and tempting me and that kind of stuff. And yeah, he does that to her, and yeah. After an awkward conversation, it was really getting eerily. No means no, by the way. I don't care what gender you are and what gender you sleep with or genders you sleep with or whoever you sleep with. No means no. And then Richard comes back, wonders what the hell, why'd they do that. He offers to basically pay her off by her silence because they can only get in and out by helicopter. That's how we see them arrive. That's how we're going to see them leave. Well, one of them. And she runs out. They run to this cliff. And there's this argument, this kind of stuff. Oh, let's call a helicopter. And he does. But then Richard finally says, you know what? Because she was like, maybe I'll just tell your wife. He pushes her. And she kind of, gets impaled somewhat on a piece of, on like an old tree. And survives. They decide to go do their usual hunting. And then we get basically, I'm just going to kind of like, leave a few things to the imagination. But I will say, she comes up with a creative way. Her iPod is, disconnected. She gets her headphones with her lighter that she just happened to have. And she gets a little bit of brush because she's hanging like this. So she's facing up at the sun. And she doesn't have to worry about Len stealing that sunshine, fortunately. I know it wasn't about the sun, shut up. But she gets some brush and sets it on fire and basically burns the tree down. Somehow doesn't burn herself. That's fine. But now she's basically on the run. And the 3 guys realize, shit, she's not there. She's not dead. What if she somehow gets back to civilization? They're like, she's wounded. She's bleeding out. It'll be fine. Well, then she manages to find Dimitri after hiding in the lake and that kind of stuff. They separate. He's on his own. And even though he's like drowning her and, doing some stuff and everything and doing it that does not look like drowning, she eventually gets his knife in one of the parts where he lifts her up, and then she gets a knife and then comes back up and stabs him in the eye and just twists it. And yeah, he's dead. He's dead. Pretty good scene right there. I'll say that much. Him being supremely, and by the way, see, an extra touch of that was he actually walked in and saw what Stan was about to do and didn't do anything, just turned the TV on and let it happen, which is just as bad as the act. So now she has an ATV-like thing. The synth score was a choice, it certainly was. She basically gets into a cave and she's got the piece of wood still hanging out of her, by the way. I mean, it's not, like, huge, but it's big enough. And there are these beers and stuff like that were on the ATV. And she essentially is, like, this piece of wood is holding stuff in, but if she doesn't take care of it, she's going to bleed out. And then she ends up getting a knife, heating it up, cutting it out, and boy, that was some good body horror right there. Well done, rare director. I'm turning off my lunch now. But nevertheless, she ends up digging it out, ends up cutting the can, down, flattening it out, heating it up, and putting it like where it's going to cauterize the goddamn wound and do that. Now, that's pretty creative. That's some good stuff right there. And also, she did the drugs that were in her little necklace thing that she was asked to hold on to. So now she's tripping goddamn balls and having nightmares. But she's prepared to go after them. We cut back to Richard and Stan. And Stan basically says that line, the desert is sublime, but merciless with the careless. And Stan's like, we probably shouldn't separate, because when you're in a forest, you don't separate. Well, were we in a forest? No, you're in the desert, which actually can be worse. But, yeah, despite all nightmares, she eventually ends up in a firefight with Stan. Stan, who, by the way, is trying to add gas to his vehicle, and she ends up shooting him. She ends up shooting him in the shoulder, though, because she's not an expert shot. And she's chasing after him. He manages to get on the goddamn cliff. Somehow, despite being shot in the shoulder, he ties it off. That was actually pretty good. And then he gets up there and he gets behind her and shoots the earring off. And the earring actually is something that's shown in the substance as well. That's a nice little way to tie. That was in the trailer, I believe. So that's a nice little way to tie that together. It could be a staple of Corley's filmmaking. Coralie. If I'm saying this wrong, I apologize. I really do. I'm sorry if I'm saying her name wrong. But, so, part of her lobe gets shut off, so now she's having a problem hearing. So it's like really, really, like, muffled on this side. Like, put it over your ear and try to listen to this, and you'll notice that it's, like, really, really muffled. And, like, maybe don't press on your ear too hard, because then you might cup it wrong. But don't two girls, one cup it wrong, but nevertheless, there's some broken glass, not everywhere, but just enough where Stan steps on it, and boy does he care, because he has to dig it out. There's like this cut on his foot, big enough. Oh, man. And then he gets in the vehicle with a bloody foot, and a bad foot and everything, just barely hanging on. Apparently he's Carrie Von Erich after June 4th, 1986. I can work a Von Erich joke in any reviews, seriously. But then she manages to shoot him and then gets rid of his body and gets the Jeep. So even despite the fact there's blood there, it is what it is. Richard now realizes, well, shit, I'm on my own. I'm going to go back to the house. So he does. And then Jen gets after him and shoots him in the gut, really gets a good gut shot on him. I mean, there's blood all over. I didn't know that much blood was in the human body. Because he's bleeding over the hallway, bleeding everywhere. This is after he took a shower, so oh no, he was freshly cleaned after doing what he did to his mistress. And then they get in a nice, game of cat and mouse, going down the hallway and everything. She slips on the blood. He manages to hit her with the butt of his gun. So you think he's going to win, but he gets overconfident and everything. You thought you could take care of those two losers, but you thought you could take care of me? You can't take care. The only chance you had was when I offered to pay you off, and you think you're so smart. And then she reaches in his gut wound and then manages to get the gun and sticks it right there, and boom! Blows him away. By the way, Richard had also called the helicopter earlier. So she's just standing there covered in blood, and the helicopter's coming. I would have gotten in the water and washed up the blood. But whatever, it's fine. Minor quibble about maybe going 10 to 15 minutes longer than it needed to. But it's still so well paced for 90% of the time, I really can't complain. A-. Really good stuff. Really, really good stuff. Not perfect, but pretty damn close as far as a revenge thriller. Definitely one of the best revenge thrillers I've seen in quite a while. So yeah, can't wait for the substance in just a few days. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Rickland. I'll see you soon.